Welcome people, I'm here with Notes Explained, helping solve your chapters with notes. But before that, do share with your mates if you think that my notes are really very helpful. And for more notes and notifications, please subscribe and press the bell icon that has been given just right below. Today, I'm here with the very first chapter, A Letter to God, that had been written by a Mexican writer, G.L. Fontes, and his full name is Gregorio Lopez Fontes. So let's start with the main character of the story. It's Leandro, and he was a farmer who lived on the top of a low hill, and it was the only house in the entire valley. He was the one who cultivated corn, and the only thing that he needed was a downpour, that means good rain. We can also see a lady who was Leandro's wife, and she was busy preparing supper. After preparing supper, she called the older boys who were working in the field and the younger boys who were playing near the house. As Leandro prayed for rain, so also maybe his prayer was about to be fulfilled, and all of a sudden we can see huge mountains of clouds approaching, and it was from the northeast direction that the clouds appeared. The air was as fresh and sweet, and Leandro went out to feel the pleasure of rain on his body, and he was so much excited that out of happiness, he considered the raindrops as new coins. The big drops of rain were considered as 10-cent pieces, and the small drops of rain were considered as 5-cent pieces. Leandro was very much satisfied after a good rain, since his field was once again gloomy, lively, and we can also see that it was covered in a curtain of rain. But there was a mishappening, and that was a strong wind began to blow. Along with the strong wind, there was rain, and hailstones began to fall. The hailstones were like silver coins, and these silver coins were termed as frozen pearls by the boys who were collecting them. It took place for an hour, and just imagine the hailstones, storm, and rain taking place for an hour means everything was covered with white hailstones, and the field looked as if it was covered with salt. Can you imagine rain, strong wind, and the hailstones falling for one continuous hour? It had a devastating effect. And you know what? His field, his corn, everything were destroyed. His field was white as if covered with salt due to hailstones, and no leaves, no flowers were on his field. He was really very depressed. And he thought, and he said to his sons, that do you know that a plague of locusts would have left more than this? That means what? Locusts are tiny insects that often destroy crops. So Leandro said that if these locusts or if these tiny insects would have eaten my crops, then at least they should have left something. But here, the hailstones had left nothing. What should we eat the whole year? He was really very sad. And out of sadness, he was not able to say anything. But he gave a ray of hope to his wife and to his sons. He did say to them that it's okay, because we would obviously get a help from God. He is the only Savior who would obviously help us in times of need. He also did say that no one dies of hunger and had complete trust in God. Now let's see what happens and what does he do next. In order to get help from God, what did he do the next Sunday? He began to write a letter. That means a letter to God. And this was his first letter. Because he knew that if God didn't help him, then there was no one in the valley to help him out. So in the letter, the thing he mentioned was that he wanted 100 pesos in order to sow his field again. And he mentioned all the mishappening that had happened to his crop. Then he put the letter in an envelope. He went to the town and placed a stamp on the letter. After placing the stamp, he dropped it into the mailbox. How much faith he had that he had really written a letter to God, and he had also posted it. So let's see whether he gets a reply or not. Does God really help him in his problem? Or does God really send him the 100 pesos that he wanted? Now, the letter was in the mailbox and it was picked up by the postman who used to help at the post office in order to transport the letters from one place to another. Now, when this postman saw the letter with the address God, he was really very shocked since he had never seen such an address in his whole lifetime. He laughed heartily after seeing the letter, and he went to the postmaster and showed him the letter. The postmaster was a fat and an amiable fellow. At first he laughed heartily when he saw the letter, but later he became very serious since he had never seen in his lifetime a person writing a letter to God, and he wished that he too had such faith in God. He did not want Lenjo to lose his faith in God, and so he thought of a plan. He did really want to answer the letter. And in order to answer his letter, he wanted to collect money from the employees, his friends, and he himself for an act of charity. So, by collecting money from everyone, he collected at least 70 pesos. And after collecting 70 pesos, he kept in an envelope and wrote a signature, God, on the envelope, so that Lencho would not understand that it was given by some other people. Rather, it was God, he himself, who had written the letter in order to help him out. Lencho wrote the first letter to God on Sunday, and the other Sunday, he went to the post office in order to see whether God had replied his letter. And after a time, he saw that a postman coming near to him, and when he came, he handed him the letter. Postmaster, in order to see his reaction after getting the letter, he was sitting in his office and he was peeping out in order to see Lencho's reaction. But Lencho was not at all shocked since he knew that God would obviously answer his letter. So he was rather happy and he opened the letter. When he opened the letter, he was very surprised at first, and then later he became very, very angry because he found only 70 pesos. He knew that God could never make a mistake. God is very correct in his decision. So if I have asked 100 pesos, that means I have to get 100 pesos and not 70 pesos, was his viewpoint. As we know, Lencho is in a very angry mood. In order to write the second letter to God, he went up to the window, asked for a paper and ink, put the paper on the writing table, and wrote the letter. In the letter, he wrote that he got only 70 pesos and he wanted the rest, that means the 30 pesos. He was sure enough that God would send 100 pesos if he asked 100 and not 70 pesos. That means he thought that the rest money, that means the 30 pesos, was taken by the post office employees, for which he was bound to call them the bunch of crooks. When he finished writing the letter, he went to the window again, bought a stamp, licked the stamp, and affixed to the envelope with a blow of his fist, and finally dropped it into the post box. With this, we can say that how much faith he had in God and believed that God would obviously send him the money and with the correct amount. He didn't even know that it may not be God who was helping him out. It may be some other people, or it may be the post office employees who were helping him out. But it was totally out of his mind since he had complete trust in God and he knew that God was the only one to help him. Now, after dropping the mailbox, we can see the postmaster who was eagerly waiting for his reaction, and now when he saw that Lencho was writing a second letter, he became very curious to know what was written in the second letter. A word of thanks or anything else. And when Lencho went out, the postmaster went to the mailbox and read the letter. And just imagine what had happened later. So thus, we can also say that this story is an open-ended story where we can continue the story and we can think or we can imagine it out that what had happened later. So that's the end of the chapter where we get a very important lesson, that is faith in God. Every chapter has an ending with a moral lesson. So the chapter that we read just now has a very important moral lesson, is that when we have complete faith in God, He is the one to help us in any times we need, whether it may be in good times or in bad times. He is the only one to help us. It may not be direct, but indirectly He would obviously help us. So this is the thing that we can see in this chapter. Though Lenjo was not directly helped by God, but maybe God has sent His messenger or His help through the post office employees, for which he got the 70 pesos. So when we have complete faith in God, we would obviously be helped.